Hey guys, this is Mark, and got some time to take a couple of questions here. And here's one from an NT wife. Wanted to know how to help her ASD level 1 husband to be a better parent. Well, let me ask you a few questions. Have you micromanaged him in the past, and how did that go? Have you told him what he was doing wrong in the past, and how did that go? And with tasks that weren't emergent, have you wanted things done on your timeline rather than on his? How did that go? And have you wanted things done according to your standards rather than his? How did that go? So I'm asking you those questions because if you are parenting him too, then he's going to feel like a child and he's not going to really feel confident in being a parent. So how can you help him be a better part of the kids' lives? Well, don't set him up for failure. So let's say, for example, that your son wants dad to throw a ball around on a Saturday morning, but you know that he's exhausted from a tough week at work. So you can kind of protect him in a way, your husband that is, from looking like a bad parent by explaining to your son that he needs to sleep a bit. And so in this way, you're kind of not necessarily making excuses for your husband, but you're kind of going to bat for him in a way. Another thing, you can talk your husband, talk him up in front of the kids, brag on him in front of the in-laws, in front of his friends. Again, if he knows you're out there bragging on him, he won't want to let you down, period. Another thing to consider is when you're both with the kids, let him be the star. Instead of piping in with directions and ideas for him and the children, let him guide the moment. So as you give your husband opportunities to prove himself, he'll feel more confident as a man and as a father. Another thing to consider is if your husband really feels like you believe that he's trying to be a good dad, he's more likely to live up to your expectations. On the other hand, if you think you have pegged him as a bad dad, he might feel defeated and unmotivated to even try. And I guess the other thing I would say is don't guilt trip him. If you do say things like, well, you should have done this, or why don't you do that? You never he might buck up and not make the time for the kids just to spite you. So he might not know, how to be a good dad, but you can help him and let him take care of the kids more on his own without micromanaging him. That's all I have to say about that. We could take a deeper dive on that at some other time. Here is a question. I'm just kind of summarizing. How can I help my husband to follow through with more of my expectations? Okay. Well, what I would suggest there is do a little bit of end of the day feedback. And so this is kind of a report card delivered to your, in this case, ASD level 1 husband in the form of a text. And I would suggest voice to text. So in this end of the day feedback, you're providing feedback regarding his contributions or lack thereof. Now, this is exclusively for these ASD spouse who is not sure what he's doing right and what's appreciated versus areas where improvement can be made. And he's open to your feedback. If those two things aren't in place, I wouldn't do this. So at the end of the day, you're going to text him regarding what he did right, along with a few words of appreciation. And also things that need to be worked on. Let's say things that need to be worked on rather than things that you did wrong or areas that you failed. So let's say, for example, let's say that he cooked dinner that night. So you could say, in your end of the day text to him, you did a great job with dinner. I appreciate you cooking a few times through the week. I like how you handled the kids when they were fussy about completing their homework. I thought it was very nice of you when you came home from work and you came straight to me and said, how was my day? So you're saying all the positive things that may have happened first, then you're going to follow it up with some recommendations for improvement. The sink needs a little work. We need to remember to lock the back door before we go to bed too. So in this way, you're starting with the positives, and you want to shoot for no less than 50% positive feedback and no more than 50% recommendations for improvement. I would also avoid using the term you, Y-O-U. Instead, use phrases. So instead of saying, well, you did this or you didn't do that, I would just say, it would be helpful if this happened, or such and such could use a little work. So in summary, end of the day feedback, you're going to text him the one or two, maybe three things that you appreciate that he did right. And then you follow that up with a few areas of things that need to be worked on. So that would be a way to get more compliance with him regarding meeting some of your expectations. Let's see. Have another question here about how can I make peace with the fact that I have to do all the relationship work? I don't want you doing all the relationship work, let alone make peace with it. So I would say if you feel like you're doing all the relationship work for you, this was a question from an NT wife, less work is better. Okay. If you feel that you're doing all the relationship work, maybe it's time to think in terms of less is better. So you could think of effort involving doing or avoiding. So on one end, you're working on doing something, but on the other end, you're working on avoiding something. So working on something takes a lot of time and energy. I'm recommending that you back off on that. Avoiding something does require discipline, but not much time or effort. So think of it like this. We have two categories of poor doing. Two categories of poor doing. There's doing that yields no positive result. And then there's also poor doing that actually makes a bad problem worse. So with this idea in mind, you're trying to avoid the negatives. So rather than you're trying to avoid the negatives rather than exert some course of action, lecturing, arguing, pleading, negotiating, fixing, reasoning with, etc. So what I would say to do is, kind of as an assignment, list those things that you've been doing or saying that yield no positive result or make a bad problem worse. And then from that list, pick those things that you're willing to avoid doing or saying. I'm not saying, well, just give up and never do anything, but I'm saying pick your battles carefully. And if you feel like you're doing all the relationship work, that means you probably have been doing all the relationship work, which means that he doesn't feel like he has to do anything because the good old wife will take care of it. So when you start backing off some, it's more likely that he will start getting up to bat and doing more on his end, at least more so than he is now. So I think with those three, we'll stop. And thank you for your questions. There'll be a link below this video if you want to join and get access to members-only videos and be able to ask questions on these live chats. Okay, we'll call that a quit for now. Thanks, guys. See you soon.